Hi friends, it's Miss M back with a video about questions. Interesting you say. Well, the reason I want to talk about questions is because as a preschool speech language pathologist, or even earlier than preschool, early intervention speech pathologists typically talk about questions in a very interesting way. And the reason I say it's interesting is because I never understood it until I got into the preschool world. And even my first year working as a preschool speech language pathologist, I didn't understand what it really meant, or like the real reason why we say try not to ask open-ended questions. So, if you're a parent and you've been to an IEP meeting for your little one and you've had your speech pathologist or your child's teacher make that recommendation to you and you're kind of like, what? I'm going to go into that. And it's really interesting because it took me, like I said, about a year to really understand it. So no pressure. This is kind of an interesting concept because we want to ask questions because we want to promote our little one's speech and language development. We want to promote their expression, however that is. So we want to initiate interactions. And what's the most organic way we know to do that? When we're in a conversation with somebody, we ask questions, right? The key, like I said, open-ended questions are things like, what did you do at school today? Where there's all this information that, one, a child has to process, but two, it's not something that's in the moment. So those open-ended questions are a little bit more difficult when we're trying to facilitate that receptive language. If the child has a little bit more of a difficulty with maybe processing the auditory information, again, expressive language, getting all that information out might be difficult. So there's a lot of underlying factors that make open-ended questions a little bit more difficult, especially with our little ones that have those identified speech and language needs. But even with little ones that are just early communicators, right? It's good to think about the ways that we can foster that receptive language and that expressive language and promote that confidence in those skills before we start asking all of these maybe more complex questions. So, like I said, we can't help but ask those questions, but we don't want to bring unnecessary stress. So, and yes, I'm reading my notes like always because I don't want to forget this really important information. But we don't want to, if we have a back and forth going, we don't want to ask a question. Again, I'm going to go back to, what did you do at school today? And the reason I go back to that question really quick is because that is something that I know that if I don't have a child, but if I did, and I know from experience with talking with parents, that's something they want to be able to ask their child when they pick them up from school. What did you do? They want to hear about their day, and it's so important. And so I'm going to give you some strategies to find out about your child's day when you're asking those questions, or anything else, right? Anything that might be open-ended. But to facilitate that confidence, to keep the conversation going, because when we ask that open-ended question, you might find that your child just kind of stops. And it's a little bit more abstract. Like I said, it's not in real life, and we want to match where our child or the individual is at. We want to get to their level. So there's a variety of different ways that we can do this. There's a variety of different ways that we can ask children questions to foster their independence, their ability to answer questions, and build on the complexity that we can later add as they develop. Something that I use in my sessions when I'm working with children, or that I'll recommend to the parents that I work with, is to use a 3-to-1 rule. So, and sometimes I say 5-to-1. That might seem a little bit crazy, but what that rule means is, for every question you're going to ask or that you want to ask, make sure you've used 3 statements, because statements, they add information. Now I'm gonna pull something really off the wall in for you. So in improv, if you know me, and if you don't, now you know, one of my favorite hobbies that I do with my boyfriend and my family is comedy improv. We have a couple different groups that meet, pre-COVID, that met a couple times a week. And one of the basic rules in improv, if you're a theater person and you know a little bit about the improv world, is don't ask questions. And the reason why we don't, now you can ask questions, I guess I should say, but again, there's a certain way that we like to ask questions in an improv scene. So when you're starting out in improv, or if you're starting out in a communication, right? If you're an early communicator, asking questions is really hard. So in an improv scene, and you can think this might be actually a really helpful analogy. In an improv scene, you can't ask an open-ended question because you're always supposed to be adding information. Why? Because that scene is completely abstract. You might be up there with your scene partner. You've been given a situation, a setting, something, maybe one word from the audience to build an entire scene off of, to build entire relationships between two characters off of. So if I walk into the scene and I'm the first person that speaks to my scene partner and I say, "How's it going?" Now my scene partner has to formulate an entire emotion, maybe entire backstory, everything on their own. Versus if I walk in and I say, "Hey Johnny, I heard you got a raise today." That already gives so much information, right? So let's back up. That was a statement, if you didn't know, and I said there's that 3-to-1 rule, right? And in improv, like I said, we try not to ask questions, especially at like a beginner level. But if you're using that rule in an improv scene, you're giving 3 different bits of information. Another rule of improv, the yes and. So you always agree to what's going on in the situation, what emotions are being felt, and you add information. So that's the same thing here. We want to give 3 statements because we want to be adding information. You want to give your little ones all this support, this great foundation of information when you're talking with them. So if you're on the drive home from school and they're in the back of the car, but you want to have that conversation, before saying, "How was it? How was your day? What did you do?" Say, you can narrate what happened. "Oh, I saw that you were playing with Lily as I picked you up. Oh, Lily has a pink backpack with a unicorn. You love unicorns," or, things like that. You're adding that information. You're building that imagery in your little one's mind. Then maybe you'll ask, did you play with Lily on the playground today?" That was a very specific kind of question I just asked. That was a yes or no question. So we're going to go a little bit more into depth because that's a type of question that I want to get into. But that's the idea. You're building that scene, right? If you're an improv, you're building that scene, you're building that imagery, you're pulling from their environment and what they know, what's most relevant in that moment. It might be that you're in your car, you're getting ready to drive away. I'm thinking of my specific school site where you can see the playground from like the pickup lane. So you can see the playground. "Oh, look, I see the slide." Or as you're walking to the car, there's the slide. You like to go down the slide. What do we say when we go down the slide? We say, "Wee." Obviously, I don't recommend talking that fast to your little ones. I'm just trying to get all this information out and as it's coming out of my brain. But that's the point. You're giving that information. You're giving that context. And you know me and how much I love building on context, right? So we have familiarity between us and the child. Okay, so there's your 3-to-1. So add information, add information, add information, and then pop in a question. Now, here's your different types of questions that might be a little bit easier for comprehension, for processing, and for just answering, because maybe your child has limited vocabulary, and yes, you're trying to build on that, but you want to meet them where they're at. You want to build them up for success before you start adding in that vocabulary demand and things like that. So one of the really great and really magical forms of questions are choices. Choice questions allow the child to make a choice, gives them control. I mean, you know how much I love following the child's lead, right? And giving them control. And it makes it so there's less demands on their capacity. So if they're a child who maybe right now at this moment has shorter utterances, or maybe one-word signs or one gesture at a time, things like that, then giving a choice is so helpful because, one, you're giving them a chance to participate in the interaction, right? Yes, you're asking them a question, but let's say, do you want to color or do you want to read? And they can see it, right? So if they're a pointer, they can point easily and answer that question, and it sets them up for success. Or they might say color or book. Maybe you're reading already and you decide, okay, do you want to read more or color? And maybe they'll just decide more. So, we want to do this because we were already doing this. Things like that. And did you notice what I did here? I had real objects ready for you. You want to have real objects, especially for the choices. Now, you might be working up and you might have visuals eventually where they get to choose between two visuals, and then it might work into verbal prompting. You know, there's a little bit of a hierarchy sometimes there, but it really does help. So if it's mealtime, right, or a snack time, and they have carrots or grapes, hold up the carrots and hold up the grapes. Give them an opportunity to use any modality that they choose that's going to be the most functional, the most successful for them. And then you can narrate. So if they point to the grapes, great. Oh, you chose grapes. Yummy grapes. You know, and right there, you've given them the answer, but you've also acknowledged that they did answer in their own way, and you keep building that language. You expanded on it, right? So you said, yummy grapes. Grapes taste good. Grapes are sweet, you know, things like that. So you always expand because yes, we are concerned about that vocabulary maybe, and we want to add on it, but we also want to praise that success first and foremost. Another form of question, which I showed you I did earlier, yes/no questions. Now, if you've seen my video on the knock knock box, you know I've got my yes and no all set up for me on my knock knock box as a visual. Can you see that? Yes, you can. Yes/no questions are easy. They're also kind of related to having a choice, right? But you can do yes/no in so many ways, which is why I love it. So you can do yes, you can do no, you can do yes, you can do no, you can do, right? Lots of ways to interpret yes and no. But they're questions that can be answered in very one, maybe short, simple way, whether it's a gesture, facial expression, change in affect, things like that. Do you want to go outside? Do you want water? Do you want to play in the pool? You know, things like that. So if you're on your way home, you know, you're walking out with your child outside of their preschool classroom or daycare or whatever. Oh, you know, do you want, let's see, you're gonna take them for ice cream. Do you want good ice cream? Again, don't have kids. Probably know better than to offer ice cream, maybe when it's nap time, right? So maybe you're gonna go home. Do you want to read a book? Do you want to cuddle? You know, things like that. You might be picking them up, and again, you want to obviously know you want to hear about their day. So maybe again, did you play with Lily today? You know, oh, do you like unicorns? Because that was what was on Lily's backpack, remember? So things like that, where you're meeting them where they're at. You're not putting all of this, oh, do you play with Lily on the playground? I mean, that's a yes, no, but maybe something a little bit more like, what did you play with Lily today? Because that might be a little bit more, it just might be too broad in that moment. So you got to start specific. Another improv thing that I've learned through the years. Okay, the next type of question, WH questions. Now, in the preschool setting, I get a mixture. I have children where I'm just doing choices. I have children where I'm doing WH questions. It's kind of a range. So I've gotten to see all these things work, and I work with parents to meet their child where they're at. And WH questions are those who, what, when, where, and why. Now there's a variety of research out there that shows, what questions are best to work at what developmental stage, and what age might be, the norm for having developed the ability to answer those questions and receptively, understand what who versus what means. But really, children learn to answer who, what, and where questions first. So that's kind of those are the basics. And if you think about who, what, and where, those might be the easiest, the most specific, right? Why is way more abstract. How? Way more abstract. When? Time. Time is a concept that has to kind of get learned, especially when you think about early intervention in preschool. Like time is just hard because little ones, really, I see them learning time as they're adjusting to their school schedule, as they're learning routines. When I get a fresh 3-year-old and they start their preschool program, time is not relevant because they know they yesterday got to kind of do their day at their own pace, maybe. Now they're in a completely new environment and they have to do whatever everybody else is doing at the time that they're doing it, and that is not okay, because they lost a little bit of control there. So time is irrelevant in the beginning. So when is a little bit of a harder concept sometimes. And that's not the only reason why, but that's what I notice. And it's it makes so much sense. You're like, yeah, who cares when? I want it now, always now, right? Okay, so who, what, and where are those kind of earlier developing WH questions? Again, we're not saying, what did you do at school today all the time. We're still kind of maybe saying, who did you play with on the playground? Who did you go down the slide with? Who, if you're thinking of a teacher, who did your snack time today? Who read your story today? In my preschool classes, I see the teachers kind of switching off. So one day it's going to be Miss Christie, another day it's going to be Miss Jenny reading the story. So that might be a little bit easier for them to grasp. They might get it wrong, but they answered, right? Because maybe they thought about the day before. And that's okay. Like we still acknowledge, oh, really? What did, maybe not say what did Miss Jenny read about, but typically, especially in preschool, there's great communication between the teacher and the parents. So you might have a handout that you kind of already know what they're doing. And the reason the teachers do that, and if you don't get a handout, ask for one. Ask, what are you doing today? Or ask the teachers, what did you do today? So I can probe those questions, and set my child up for success. Oh, I heard you read a story about a bunny today. Oh, bunnies are fluffy. They like to hop around. What was the bunny's name? Peter Cottontail or whatever. I don't know if it's even a book. I know it's a song, or maybe I don't know. So that's the point. So that way you have that background when you're probing for those WH questions. But again, choices, then yes, no, then WH. We want to build them up for success. So where your child is at is where you start. You can include those little things, maybe you model a WH question. Who read your story? Wait 5 seconds. I heard Miss Jenny read your story today. Miss Jenny does good voices, and things like that. It's funny, I really work with a Miss Jenny and she does do great voices. So I just had a flashback. And that just came to me. It's so natural. Where questions are great, they allow, again, for that location. So if you're working on prepositions, where questions are awesome. Where questions could be really great, especially we've talked a little bit about object permanence. So if you can see that my books are right there on the shelf, are they on top, are they under, in the middle, which I would probably go for in the middle, right? But they can see that. So where are the books? And they might point, because that might be where we're at right now. They might say there, and they'll point, or whatever it is, or they'll go to them and touch them. And we acknowledge that, right? Yes, that's where they are. They are in the middle, or they are on the bookshelf, or in the bookshelf, or on top, under, next to, whatever. And WH questions, one more thing before I forget and go on, but they really are like setting that true conversational back and forth up. So again, if you're even just modeling it, or they're imitating the answer or something like that, that's great. Don't put too much emphasis on it if they're still maybe at a level where we're just working on answering those choice questions, and that's okay, right? So those are kind of the 3 types. Again, add information, add information, add information. I just sound like I'm an improv coach now. And so now you might be wondering, okay, but when do I use them? When do I know? How do I read the situation? How do I tell if my client needs to work on this, or if I should be probing for yes, no, right? You can use all types. Like I said, you can be modeling the language for all types of questions, but when you're maybe using that expectant look and anticipating that answer, you might know what your child or what your client really can and can't do. So again, setting them up for success, starting with something that's a little bit easier, and then in the conversation or in, the interaction, then you kind of throw in that WH question, wait 5 seconds, and then go on. So it really just, it's like I learned as a server back in the day, right? You read the table, you read the child, you read the client. It could be a really great day, and they could be just, vocalizing or talking a lot or something, or gesturing a lot. And so, oh, I could get more today, so I'm going to push for more. It might be a day where preschool wasn't that fun for them. So you're like, okay, I'm just, we're going to sing songs all the way home. And that's great. But obviously pick questions that you think your child can answer. Allow for more information, again, to be shared. So if you're asking yes, no, did you play with Lily today? And they say, yeah, okay, well, now we want to build on that, right? You played with Lily. Did you go down the slide? Yeah. Oh, we say wee down the slide. Do we go fast or slow? Give them a choice, fast or slow. Do you like to go fast or slow? And build on that. Bring back the picture, paint the picture with what you model, with what you put in before you maybe ask that question. That's a really, that's profound. Paint the picture. I'm sure that's been said before too. You guys notice, like, I'm always coming up with things, but like I've learned them from somewhere. So I guess that when it comes to questions, sorry, I got a little sidetracked thinking of how profound I am. But you know, you want to just make sure that you're building that foundation. Another example that I have written down, so if your child is playing, you know, and let's say you're building with Legos, or you're building, I like this one, you're building a train tracks, right? So the train tracks are all set up, your child set them up, and they're trying to get you to interact with them, look, play with me, or whatever. You know, you might ask a question, you might say, oh, did you make that? Did you build a train, or did you build a road or something? And the child will probably answer yes, because they just did it. Or, you know, somehow give you an acknowledgement of, yeah, like I did, like play with me. If that ends it, right? They say yeah, and that kind of ends the exchange. So you might then build on that. Let's make the trains go fast, and then start modeling that language. Because yeah, you know, you wanted to ask them a yes/no question, but you could, instead of that yes/no question, start with a WH question. You could say, what did you build? Give them the chance, right? Because now you've got a little bit longer of an interaction going, so you gave them that chance to answer. But then, you know, they might just be like, you know, I'm not there yet, Mom, ask me another question. So you might say, did you build a train? Or did you build a track, or whatever? And they might, yeah, you know, I did. Oh my goodness, do the trains go fast? And so keep it going. And then again, add your statements in there, you know, wow, this is a really strong track. Oh, the trains go up, now they go down. And we could have a whole play session together with trains. I mean, you and I. Anyway, so yeah, so that's questions. And I hope that this was helpful, because I know, again, when I started out with preschool, I was like, why can't I ask open-ended questions? Why am I being, you know, basically guided, which I had great SLPs guiding me, but I remember sitting in my first preschool speech meeting, and they're like telling me, yeah, and make sure, you know, you tell parents don't ask open-ended questions. And then I was like, now I have a million open-ended questions. And so it's important to, I think, just for us to understand, oh, that's why. Oh, the demands capacity. Oh, we don't want to be overwhelming. We want to set up for success. And it's a lot to think about for our little ones. And so, and then, you know, again, when you say don't ask open-ended questions, okay, but then what? And can you show me how? Can you give me examples and all of that? So I hope, again, this was that for you.